Section 2 of The Black Cat, Volume 6, Number 5, February 1901. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Greg Giordano. The Black Cat, Volume 6, Number 5, February 1901. Section 2. The Sins of Sims by Harle, Oren, Cummins. The following letter, strange as the connection may at first seem, was the indirect cause of my elevation from the position of bellboy in a Boston hotel to a head clerkship with one of the largest book publishing houses in America. Boston, Massachusetts, May 4th, 1900. Messrs. Choate, Callender and Company, New York City. Gentlemen, I send you today by same mail, registered, the manuscript for a book entitled Over the Hot Sands. It is, as you will see upon reading, an exposé of masonry, and contains all the secrets of every one of the 33 degrees of that fraternity. It is worth not thousands, but millions of dollars, for the number of editions which you can sell will exceed tenfold that of the greatest literary success of any century. It is perfectly safe to say that you can dispose of 5,000,000 copies, and the fortune of the firm which publishes this work is assured. As none of the members of your firm are Masons, there will be no blame whatsoever attached to any of you for publishing such a work, and the punishment, should any result, would fall entirely on me, the author, for which reason I must enjoin absolute secrecy in all our future dealings. I offer this manuscript to you for $25,000, and when you consider that you will probably receive from $2 to $3 million for the same, my price does not seem high. If you accept my proposal, the accompanying directions must be followed in every detail. Money must be sent, not by check, but in 50 of $500 banknotes, securely tied up into as small a package as possible, and sent registered to arrive in Boston Friday, May 11, 1900. Yours, Frawley Sims, Lock Box 11,136, Boston, Massachusetts. But before I tell you of the part I took in the scheme of Mr. Frawley Sims, I must go back to the date of the arrival of the above letter at Choate, Callender and Company's. Unfortunately for the success of the author of Over the Hot Sands, the assistant manager into whose hands the letter chanced to fall was a Mason, a Knight Templar, and an enthusiastic craftsman of high degree. Horrified at what he had read, he searched the morning's mail for a manuscript directed in the cramped, illegible hand in which the letter was written. He found it at last, a small package, the wrapper of which bore the same handwriting as the letter, and tearing it hastily open, he began to read. There, on neatly written pages, were revealed all the secrets of the Masonic order. As, with trembling hands, he turned over the leaves, he read the true explanation of every mystic sign and symbol, the exact phraseology of every obligation, an accurate description of every grip, password, and instruction, from the lowest to the highest degree, Scottish Rite and York Rite, and even including the side degrees of the Eastern Star and the Mystic Shrine. All were given. "If that book is ever published, it means the complete collapse of the Masonic fraternity," muttered Beekman, the assistant manager, to himself. "Mr. Frawley Sims' estimate of 5,000,000 copies is far too low. Every curious old maid, every woman whose husband is a Mason, every member of a rival fraternity, would buy a copy of such a book, no matter what the price. This must never come to the notice of the firm, if I can prevent it, even at the cost of my position." He went to Mr. Choate, the senior partner, and pleading illness secured a half-holiday. Hunting up the highest officials of the order among his acquaintance, he informed them of the impending danger. That day messages flashed over the wires to the Grand Lodge officers and to the officials of the national organization, summoning them to Boston, and 3 days later a council of war to decide how to checkmate the daring scheme of Farley Simms was held in the Masonic temple of that city. One of the Grand Wardens, living in Denver, had traveled by special train all the way to New York. It was finally decided to send, on the specified date, and as requested in the letter, a package which, however, should contain not $500 notes, but blank sheets of paper. 2 detectives belonging to the order were detailed with instructions to wait at the General Post Office during the remainder of the week for a man calling for a registered package or receiving other mail for Farley Simms. If the identity of the man could be established, the rest would be comparatively easy. Once before in the history of Masonry, a man had attempted to forswear his oaths and betray to the curious world the secrets of that order. That was in 1827, and the traitor had disappeared from human ken as quickly and entirely as a pebble dropped in the ocean. The following note was sent to the Boston address, Beekman taking it upon himself to sign the firm's initials. New York, May 8th, 1900. Mr. Farley Simms, Boston, Massachusetts, Box 11,136. Sir, manuscript received. Think favorably of your offer. Will send notes Friday as specified. Very truly yours, C.C. & Co. Messages were sent to every Masonic jurisdiction in the country, asking if anything was known of a Mr. Farley Simms, Knight Templar and 33rd degree Mason. But, as might be expected, nothing was learned. No lodge had that name on its membership roll, or had ever heard of such a man. Nothing, therefore, remained to be done except to wait for the 11th day of May, when Simms, or his representative, would call at the Boston office to secure the answer to his offer. Strict watch was kept by the 2 detectives, but no one called during the week for Farley Simms' mail. On Friday morning, however, there was a notice to call for a registered package lying in box 11,136. May 11 was, as you may or may not remember, the date of the Corbett Jeffries fistic encounter in Brooklyn, and on the night of that day, while thousands of men were eagerly waiting for news from the Seaside Athletic Club, other thousands, doubly anxious, were assembled in the Masonic temples of nearly every large city in the United States, waiting for a message from Boston to learn whether Farley Simms had been captured. Now, having conducted the reader thus far, I will explain how it happened that I, Robert Banner, bellboy number 8 at one of the largest and best Boston hotels, became involved in and learned the details of one of the cleverest as well as the most perfidious schemes ever devised by an unscrupulous man. Late in the afternoon of May 11, 1900, I answered the call of front and showed a man, registering as Kendrick Little, Buffalo, New York, to room 326. He was a tall, handsome man, about 45 years of age, with iron gray hair. He was clean-shaven and wore eyeglasses. Once in the room, I saw him looking searchingly at me. When I asked him if there was anything I could bring him, he ordered 2 martini cocktails and told me to get excused from the office, as he wanted me to go on an important errand. When, after getting permission from the office to be gone for a couple of hours, I returned some 10 minutes later with the drinks, and also my hat and coat, he was sitting by the table writing. "Lay your coat on the bed, and sit down for a few minutes," he commanded, indicating with his pen a chair opposite him. He continued writing slowly, as if thinking over what he was saying, looking up from time to time to gaze absently at me. Once he stopped for a minute and asked me my name, though I did not at the time connect myself with what he was writing. Finally, after a scrutiny which I had begun to find painful, He threw down the pen suddenly, and leaning across the table, looked me full in the face, and asked quietly, "Robert Banner, do you want to earn $50 tonight in an honest way, and then hold your tongue about it afterwards?" As you can imagine, I was more than a little surprised by such a proposal, but I found my tongue quickly and assured him that I was both willing and anxious to earn some extra money, provided there was nothing dishonorable about the undertaking. "Well, then," he answered, "listen attentively as to what I am going to say, and see if it comes within the scope of what you consider honorable." There was a slight trace of a sneer in the last of the sentence, but I was too eager to hear about the $50 to pay much attention to it. "I suppose you have heard of lotteries, and the difficulty of sending the tickets through the mails?" I nodded, and he continued, "I've ordered 25 of these tickets in a lottery. They are to have been sent to me yesterday from New York, and are now, no doubt, at the General Post Office, in a registered package addressed to Mr. Frawley Sims." I remembered seeing the name he had scrawled on the hotel register downstairs, but said nothing. "I will give you a written order which will enable you to get this package for me, and I will pay you in advance $25. The remaining $25 I will give you on the safe delivery of the package. There can be no danger to you, as you are simply performing one of your duties as bellboy in this hotel, and, should any trouble arise, you are not supposed to know what the package you are sent for contains. I have told you its contents simply to explain why it is that I give so large a fee for your services, and to ensure your giving the commission your undivided attention. It would be a very difficult thing for me to account for having such a package in my possession, while you, as I have explained, run no risk whatever. Can you reconcile all this with your honorable conscience?" I had been thinking rapidly while he was talking. I knew that, under the present close surveillance of the mails, the usual method of selling lottery tickets was through agents who traveled about the country and delivered them personally. I therefore judged Mr. Frawley Sims, alias Kendrick Little, to be one of these distributing agents. That the package contained lottery tickets I did not in the least doubt, but that the number was only 25, that he was purchasing them for himself, I very much questioned. However, that was his business, not mine, and if he chose to give me $50 for simply going to the post office and getting a registered package, I saw no reason why I should not accept it. True, I might be aiding and abetting the sale of lottery tickets, which I knew was forbidden by law, but, as he said, if there was any trouble, I could not be expected to know the contents of every parcel I was charged with carrying. Then, too, I was working for $7 a week, and his liberal offer was too great a temptation for me, and I agreed to do his errand. He counted out 5 $5 banknotes, and as he handed them to me, I noticed that his hand trembled slightly. "Now," said he, "I want you to listen to the directions I am going to give you as carefully as if your life depended on them. After securing this package of tickets, you must put it in your inside coat pocket, take a carriage up Milk Street to Washington Street, get out at the Old South Church, and walk slowly along Newspaper Row. On account of the prize fight tonight, there will be a large crowd about the bulletin boards. When you get to the Globe office, take the package out of your pocket, cautiously, so that no one following you would notice your action, and as you pass the main entrance to the building, I will run against you and snatch the package from your hand. You may then take a car to the hotel and wait for me here. That will complete your duties, and I will pay you the remaining $25 on my return to the hotel tonight." He gave me another $1 for cab fare, and I started for the post office. As I stepped up to the registry window, I noticed 2 men standing near, talking earnestly, when I asked for a registered package for Frawley Sims, box 11,136. One of the 2 men by the window stepped close beside me and looked at me sharply, and then moved back to his companion, but when I looked for them again, they had disappeared. I had some difficulty in getting the tickets, but I gave the registry clerk my note from Mr. Sims, and showed him my badge to prove that I was in the hotel employ, and finally he handed me, not the package I had expected, but a long white envelope, in the upper left-hand corner of which I saw the name Choate, Callender and Company. I had heard of this great book publishing house in New York, and knowing that they, of course, could not be concerned in the sale of lottery tickets, I concluded the envelope had been obtained merely to blind the post office officials. I walked out of the office, and as I stepped into a waiting cab, the two men I had noticed inside called another carriage, and I thought I saw one of them point in my direction to their driver. But it was beginning to get dark, so I was not sure. I followed exactly the directions given me by Mr. Sims, left my carriage suddenly at the corner, and walked down Washington Street toward the newspaper offices. A large crowd was already forming in front of the bulletin boards, and I could scarcely force my way along. There was a little clear space just in front of the main door of the Globe building, and as I started across it, someone collided violently with me, and I felt the envelope snatched from my grasp. This was what I was expecting, but to my surprise, another envelope was at the same time thrust into my hand, and as I turned to look back, I saw the tall form of Frawley Sims, or Kendrick Little, whichever he was, pushing his way down the street. Wondering at this new development, I worked my way out of the jam, and held the envelope up to a lighted window to see if there was any address on it, thinking that perhaps Mr. Sims had another commission for me to execute. In the same ungainly hand as the scrawl on the hotel register was written, Mr. Robert Banner, Boston, Massachusetts, and down in one corner in small letters were the two words, Preserve carefully. Thrusting the envelope into my pocket, I jumped on a car, rode back to the hotel, and hurried up to room 326. I was not surprised to find the door locked, but when I went downstairs to the office, the key was not on the rack where the room keys were kept when the guests were away from the house. I asked the front clerk for Mr. Sims, saying that I had been on an errand for him. He settled his bill and left an hour ago, but before he went he gave me this letter for you. I tore open the envelope, and there, neatly folded inside one of the hotel noteheads, were a $20 and a $5 bill. I was about to slip the envelope into my pocket, when I felt a light touch on my shoulder, and turning around, I found myself face to face with the tall man I had seen in the post office. You just received a registered letter for Mr. Sims, he said quietly, not as one would ask a question, but as if he were simply stating a fact. I did, I stammered, a vague fear taking possession of me. I must ask you to come with me for a little while. This, too, was in the same quiet tone he had first used, but as he threw back his coat, I saw the gleam of a badge, which, recognizing, I dared not disobey. As I followed him out of the hotel, my fear increased as I saw the wondering looks on the faces of the other bellboys. The tall man beckoned to a cabman who was walking his horse slowly along in front of the hotel, and as the carriage drew up to the curbstone, the door was thrown open, and, in obedience to a gesture, I stepped in to find the other man from the post office on the front seat. The remainder of my experiences would form a long story, and they were very exciting, but, to make the story short, I was taken to a large room in which 100 or so excited men were assembled, and from the various emblems and insignia upon the walls and the furnishings of the room, I knew I was in a Masonic hall. At a small table in one corner sat 3 men rapidly writing telegrams. When 2 or 3 dozen had accumulated, a nervous little man gathered them up and hurried out of the room. Once, as the door opened, I caught a glimpse of half a dozen boys dressed in the blue uniform of the telegraph service. I was put through an examination concerning my connection with Frawley Sims, which was as severe as if I had been in the witness box in a murder trial, and Mr. Beekman, the prosecuting lawyer. When I found how my supposed lottery ticket purchaser had been trying to obtain money. I was terribly frightened, for I remember reading of Captain William Morgan, who published a few Masonic secrets, and who was alleged to have been sent over Niagara Falls in an iron kettle. I could see that if I was found guilty, I could expect little mercy from the determined-looking men around me. I told my story, however, exactly as I have written it here, but I hardly think I should have been believed had I not suddenly remembered the envelope which Farley Simms thrust into my hands when he snatched from me the one I had taken from the post office. In my excitement, I had forgotten all about it until that moment. I produced it, and handing it to Mr. Beekman, told him exactly how I obtained it. He glanced over it hastily, and then turning to the anxious men who were watching him, he read, "To whom it may concern. This is to certify that Robert Banner, bellboy, is wholly ignorant of the contents of the letter taken by him at my request from the Boston Post Office on May 11, 1900. He has had nothing whatsoever to do with the book Over the Hot Sands. The only person concerned in that undertaking is Farley Simms, 33rd degree." This letter, of course, cleared me completely from any connection with the scheme. I was treated very kindly the rest of the evening, during the course of which I learned the details given in the first part of this narration. I gave as accurate a description as I could of Farley Simms, and every effort was made to locate the man. Thousands of dollars were spent, and every possible clue carefully followed up. If the matter could have been made public, and a description of the man printed in the papers, perhaps he would have been caught. But as his offense was not criminal in the eyes of the law, and as publicity was the last thing that the Masonic fraternity desired, the disadvantages under which they worked proved too great, and nothing was heard of Farley Simms. He had probably scented danger immediately upon opening the envelope and finding only blank paper, and had hurried at once to the nearest station and made his escape. It was through the efforts of Mr. Beekman that I secured my present position of shipping clerk with Choate, Callender and Company. Indeed, this was only one of several offers which were made me by the Masons in recognition of my services. My present employers never knew of the previous manuscript which was submitted to them for publication, and although Mr. Farley Simms is still at large, I do not think he will ever again make such an offer to any publisher. One day, while I was spending some of the $50 I had earned so easily, I had a feeling of sympathy for the man who had treated me with the greatest of kindness and generosity. So, that night I wrote a letter to Mr. Simms, telling him exactly what had happened to me after leaving him at the hotel that day in May, and addressed the letter to Box 11,136, Boston. Shortly afterwards my letter was returned to me by the postal authorities, with the statement that the references given by Mr. Farley Simms in hiring the box May 1st had proved to be forged letters of recommendation, and that his whereabouts was unknown. It is, therefore, partly in the hope that Farley Simms will read these lines, and know that I did as he directed, and that I, for one, am deeply indebted to him, that I have written this. Over the Hot Sands was of course not published, but the manuscript is carefully preserved in a strong box in the rooms of the Aurora Lodge, A.F. and A.M. on East 26th Street, and is one of the objects of greatest interest to Masons visiting in New York City. End of Section 2.